don't think I can be operable.
Okay.
I requires the closer to the property line than 4 times the height of the fixture. Well, if it's 8 feet in the air on the side of the house, that means it has to be 32 feet away from the house next door.
But it also says it can't exceed the height of the adjacent structure. All it's trying to do is to prevent light trespass.
Right, but it says it shall not be located closer to the property line than 4 times the mounting height of the fixture.
So if you have a fixture that's 6 feet up.
Yeah, you can't be within 24 feet.
Right.
They're 7 feet apart over here.
Okay, that's
It
good.
means there'd be no outdoor lighting, not even in the shores. You couldn't have an outdoor
Yeah.
light next to you.
Okay, that's a good point. I don't know that there's any really requirement for that one.
It's just
anymore,
not-
to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm just pointing
No,
out.
it makes sense.
It's inoperable.
No, it makes sense.
Um,
Absolutely.
uh,
I have no problem with
I
that.
mean, you can leave the height, shall not exceed the height of the adjacent structure. That makes sense.
Yeah,
I mean, hopefully. Or you just strike it.
I think I'll just strike it.
And then on the next section on J, up and down lighting, I'm going to ask you the standard question, and I'm not being critical.
Good.
Why is it 2? Why can't you have 3 flagpoles like we do?
Well,
Why is there any limitation on how many flagpoles you can have in your yard?
this was written per private property.
Okay.
Well, you asked the question, why can't we have 3?
No, if I want to have
Because
5
3's not
flagpoles.
private property, 3 are on private property currently.
What?
And I don't know of anybody who has currently 2 flagpoles.
Okay, the way I read this is you're limiting up and down lighting of up to 2 flagpoles. You're limiting,
I'm limiting it to 2 flagpoles. Right.
okay.
We can have 3. I mean, there's no requirement that it must be 2. But I got to thinking, I don't know of anybody that has on private.
Why is it necessary? Why can't it just say up and down lighting of flagpoles is permitted, 1, 2, why does it have to have the word only 2?
It doesn't.
Okay, that's where I'm going. It seems like it's an unnecessary limitation on how many flagpoles you can have. When that's not the objective, right? Isn't the objective how you light the flagpole?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
not the number of
No,
flagpoles.
not at all. I have no problem with striking the 2, and just leaving it open.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
I just went through with a fine tooth comb. I just have questions, that's all.
No,
If it's if it's an integral part, then just tell me. But
no, it's not.
it seemed to be an ancillary.
No,
Okay.
it's not, absolutely. So, in 1, 2, and 3, unless, for number 3, it describes the thresholds for the lighting in terms of lumens, and then again, the 3,000 threshold for Kelvin. Okay, next section, outdoor lights. Limits the size to 200 square feet. That would be a pretty good size sign. I said lights, I meant sign. And then it goes on further to define 3 ways of lighting non-digital electronic signs. And that would be externally lighted, internally lighted on both sides, or backlit, which is the kind that we have out in front of the marquee outside.
What is an example of a sign that would be acceptable here?
What is what?
To me, a sign is,
We don't have any sign, other than a marquee, we don't have any signs in the town.
but, I mean, it actually implies that you can have a sign by having this, doesn't it?
Are you talking about the town?
Well, I'm sure we have other ordinance that limits signs, right? You just can't put a.
We have a
big
sign
sign.
ordinance that limits signs.
Just the ones that
You can't
are
have
there
big-
that are allowable, this is how they have to be lit.
Yeah, I included the other, even though 1 and 2 don't exist, I included it thinking that at some point, somehow it might.
Well, if we get another development and they have, some sort of entrance feature or something.
That'd be
you
neat.
know.
That'd be neat.
Or if you put, change
That's
the
true.
to some type of sign.
Right.
Okay. And then the other kind is, that is defined here, is a digital electronic sign. And it notes that there's a maximum, and by the way, that is a spelling, it's lamination, it should be illumination, level of 100 nits. Now I'd have to go back myself, do the definitions to know what a nit is, but I'm not gonna do that, you guys can look it up yourself. Section 6 then talks about public right-of-way street lighting, and it requires street lightings to be fully shielded and defines, again, lumen limits, and it also requires adaptive controls. Again. Section 7
Are
requires,
we compliant with 6 right now? The new lights we put in, do you know?
yes, we are.
Okay, so we're already there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And our situation with those new lights are a little unusual in that we as a city don't control the lights. Obviously, COSA does. So all those lights are on timers, and so we're limited in terms of doing probably what we hopefully will be able to do with new street lights as far as the control. So, okay, section 7, requirements for new outdoor lighting facilities. This is a requirement by IDA. It defines the requirements for new public outdoor lighting. The most important, you can read that 1, 2, and 3 apply to different situations, but number 4 is probably the most relevant, hopefully. And I'll just read it. In the event of the establishment of a new residential subdivision where street rights of way will be dedicated to the town shall not allow the installation of streetlights except in the case of replacing the existing non-conforming streetlights. However, in cases where it is determined that street lighting is deemed necessary in public rights of way for health, safety, welfare, pedestrians, bicyclists, so forth, the installation of streetlights shall be permitted. All streetlights shall be fully shielded, meet correlated color temperature requirements, make use of adaptive controls, and be subject to curfews as directed by the town council. A lighting plan specifying the number and approximate location of streetlights and style of fixture shall be included in the final plan.
This is the whereas is where we want to apply it to
Right.
future subdivision. This is that point.
And then 8 is levels of lighting, light required and permitted at a specific location. This section just sets the limits of the lumens per acre for residential and non-residential and outdoor sports facilities.
So I have a question.
Okay.
For this stuff here, it says the total combined unshielded and shielded, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. Why would there be a limit on shielded? If it's shielded, it's not going up. So why would you limit something that's shielded? Why would you care if I had 50,000 lumens of shielded light on my house? It's shielded.
I think the potential is, to Clint's point, is that it might create, I don't know that it would, but it might create some lighting deficiencies.
I mean, it seems to me inconsistent with it seems like the tenor of all of this is that we want to have the right kind of fixtures. We want to have fully shielded, fully cut off. We want to have these kinds of, it's how we efficiently accomplish lighting.
Mm-hmm.
We're not saying blackout, we're saying you can have all the lighting you want, you can be lighting, you can have your porch lights on, you can, it seems to be our pitches that you can do all of these things that you're used to, you just have to do them the right way. And this is the first time I've seen where you're actually putting in a quota. There's actually now a quota of how much lights you can have. And that is different than the way I have been pitching this.
Yes, and this is again a requirement by IDA.
But the word shield has been added, that's in red, so somebody added that.
I added it after discussions with the IDA, the National IDA organization that I've been working with for getting their approval for the ordinance.
Okay, then let let me ask you two additional questions then. What's a net acre? And
Do I have that defined?
I've added it. Seems like a,
No, I don't have it defined.
and would that mean, let's say at Daryl's house, I'm guessing, let's just say, for the sake of argument, Daryl, you're on a quarter acre. Does that mean you're only allowed 2,500 lumens? If it's 10,000
Yeah.
per net acre? Or is it 10,000 lumens?
The other thing you get into if you're gonna limit lumens and things like that is how do we measure that? Is there a real solid way to measure it that's?
Yeah, the solid way is to take an inventory of the lights and get a total
So
number.
you just add up the
Lumen,
bulbs and if
yeah.
they exceed, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I understand your point, that limits me to 2,500 lumens. I have no idea what that is, what that looks like, but.
I mean, from a practical standpoint, new construction, we know what you have. We inspect it, and we're gonna have now a new form or something to fill out. But the reality is, I can't climb the fence and go in your backyard and count light bulbs. I mean, I don't care what this says, the functionality, which is fine, but the functional reality of life is, we're just doing the best we can. It's like running that stop sign, you know. So some of the stuff is there, we hope you pay, but we really have no real way to get a search warrant to jump your fence. But my concern is that philosophically, this is imposing a quota. But maybe 10,000 lumens per acre is such an outrageously big number that no one would ever get close to it.
Well,
I don't have a good sense for how enormous that is.
well, I don't either.
I read it a little bit differently than you. I know you said that you thought that it's trying to get us to use lighting differently, but I thought it was also limiting our lighting.
Yes.
Yes,
It's
I don't
dual track.
think, yeah, I think it's also limiting as well as how we use the lights. You know, and I know you're not saying it's blackout, but in a way, it's kind of like really limiting that.
Yeah, I guess that's not, my initial thoughts was about
Just using
how you do
And I think
the
it's-
lighting.
And it's both, isn't it?
But
You're
the
limiting
IDA
the
actually
lighting.
talks about limiting lighting.
Yeah, it's a requirement.
Okay.
It's a requirement and to get, in this case, our ordinance approved.
I saw there was a curfew for the public. Is there a curfew for private? There can't be, okay, that's, I just wanted
I mean, that would be really hard, because it's your
That's-
life, health, safety,
that's-
you know, that's.
And that could get into security and
Yeah.
things like
And
that.
I guess the other part that I'm a little, I don't know how much 10,000 lumen, if you tell me that's 6 light bulbs,
Well,
At
3,000
my house.
lumens is the equivalent of about a 200 watt bulb.
is how much?
3,000 lumens, a 200 watt bulb.
Okay.
So,
So you could have
That
3 light,
conversion.
you could have less than 1 light bulb in your quarter acre?
You said one 200 watt bulb is how many lumens?
3,000,
is 200 watt bulb.
200 watt bulb, none of them
Something in the math isn't working there.
is
Yeah.
3,000 lumen.
Well, if you would say, if you do that divisional thing where you say, okay, 10,000 per acre, then I can only have, yeah, that would do,
You get
I would
less than a
already be
bulb.
violating that with my outdoor lighting.
And 1 light bulb violates.
Yeah, and I
No.
violate it really
No, it
bad.
doesn't. Three would.
No,
Well,
it's per acre, he doesn't have an acre, he's only got a quarter of an acre.
He's making the assumption you divide the 10,000
Yeah,
by the number,
It says
you know.
per acre.
Whatever.
Yeah,
Well,
and that's a reasonable assumption. It doesn't make that clear what,
Yeah, no, it
if you're
doesn't
less than
define
an acre, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't say per dwelling.
Yeah.
No.
I understand the new construction, I understand the public streets. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the existing structures changing all their lightings, how they go about doing that, how each person or each home measures that, and you know what I'm saying? Like how, for like the basic person who doesn't read this, even me, I'm reading this now a few times and still it's hard, you know?
Yeah, well, yes, and,
Especially when you get down to you know, if you're not in compliance, you know, this could be a class C misdemeanor.
Well, yeah,
And-
that's
and
all
it's
our ordinances,
like-
yeah.
Okay, for lights, really?
Wait just a second, I want to, maybe I wouldn't skip
Mark?
over it.
You've always said that the council's only going to do ordinances that are health, safety, and welfare.
Typically.
You know, it might, you know, I explained this to my kids when they were over, you know, we're trying to dampen the light effects. But I think when you start going into, like Serena said, our personal residences and telling us, you know, a lot of these people have professional lighting companies come in to light features of their house and they go up. You know, are you going to arbitrarily tell them that you can't do that? You know, this is kind of, you know, small town Texas and it's our property and, you know, if Jose's light next door bothers me, I'll go talk to Jose, you know. That's kind of how we do it here. To have an ordinance that says, I can't have a light that shines onto Jose's driveway, you know.
Well, I think,
It gets a little, you know, I mean,
Well,
I think we're trying to get there.
Let me interject here, so the way
I think it works great for the city.
well, let me interject here, so the way Ed approached this, right, is the way that we started this was go after and see what it would take to become dark skies compliant. As we're walking through this and talking about it, maybe that doesn't make sense, maybe it's somewhere in between. And that's just what we have to talk about, this is the only way, we only have this, you know, an hour or so at each meeting to kind of work through these, so that's kind of, I think the feedback that Ed's is taking here is that maybe a strict adherence and getting dark skies compliant isn't right for us, but something in between it.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess I'm not willing to throw the dark skies out. I'm just pointing out some things where I'm not sure what this means. But I think it's great that, you know, look, if you say, we're gonna remodel the front of the house, we're gonna, you know, we had another hailstorm, we're gonna replace the lights or something. What's the preferred alternative? And we're telling you, this is what we want you to replace them with. I think that's
Yeah.
worthwhile. If you
Yeah.
gotta replace, just like us,
Yeah.
you know, we knew we needed to replace the streetlights. We had to do that, they're all mishmash and random stuff. But if you're gonna replace them, might as well replace them with
Yeah.
this. So
But
I think
went
this
back
is
to
very
what-
worthwhile.
That's not a
And I think there's a lot of options that go along that, is it makes the town consistent with the lighting theme, but it also, there's so many different options that it doesn't make everybody standardized either. So-
Yeah, I think there's enough flexibility where on paper, we're going the right direction,
Yeah.
but it's not slap you.
Yeah, and I don't have any problem in those, any part of this where we really have an issue going back to the national organization and talking with them and seeing that, making sure what their, you know, what their requirements are. And seeing whether we can tone it down or change it or something like that.
I mean,
That's an option.
Is that a possibility?
Yeah.
It is.
did they?
We don't have to join their club.
No, I meant if we wanted to join their club, is there like, can you dim it down a little bit? Or no, this is pretty much it if we
No
want
pun
to
intended, dim it down.
See, what made sense to me, without having talked to the national, was that the amount of unshielded you could have would be limited.
Yes, and that,
That would make sense to have a limit on that. And maybe 10,000 lumens seems like a good number for unshielded, just firing it off into the sky. But now when you add the shielded, that's where it seems to me to go tilt.
yeah, and I understand. And
You
it
know-
was originally drafted to specify only unshielded, but after, after a draft review, it came back that, you know, that we should include shielded. So I didn't get really an explanation for why it came back that way, so it sounds like I need to follow up and find that out.
Okay, all right,
No problem.
okay, I went, all right.
Okay.
The differentiation between third party and personal property, I think that your track is exactly right, because what happens is, you know, we're talking about basically light pollution. If you have a neighbor that's afraid of the dark or for whatever reason wants to illuminate, it lights up your yard. And so when you're sitting here, you're not telling them that that they can't illuminate. What you're really saying is, I view this from a third party. What you're basically saying is, you don't have a right to mess my yard up.
Right.
You have a right to security, you can put lights in that trigger by motion if you're that worried about it. But from my experiences, there's a big difference between first and third party, and looking out, you take a lot of conflict out of neighbors if they're not dealing with a lot of light pollution. I think for whatever it's worth, I think this is real right-headed. I had a neighbor that lit up all his trees. It drove me crazy. They never turned off. It was like, that's great. I'm sure they were terrific. I'm sure they looked great for about an hour, but they never turned off. They illuminated the yard. That's unreasonable that his decision to illuminate a tree, because it's lousy for the birds or whatever else. But the problem is that it wasn't limited to his area and his piece of property. So I think addressing the issue of, really light pollution is a completely legitimate and, again, when I look at it, not so much as I'm turning my back lights on. My neighbor gets me to your point, I'll turn them off. But,
All right, thanks.
but when you're illuminating both of your neighbors, then you've exceeded your personal property rights from my perspective. Into the
Okay, so
whatever
let's move on to section 9.
All right, section 9, and this is would be a new requirement in terms of building permit applications. This would require the addition of an outdoor lighting plan to be approved for new homes and/or back to the earlier section of, I guess, an addition of 25% or more type of thing, but it simply includes all of the requirements are listed there on 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so that's something new. We would probably need to develop a standard format for submitting that plan, perhaps.
Yeah, I guess my question, this seemed very reasonable, and I think it's just part of the packet we could do administrative. The only question I have is number 4. There's a site plan with specific measurements in feet, square feet to be illuminated. I don't know how they're going to calculate. It seems reasonable when you get a schedule of doors or schedule of windows, that you would have a schedule of, we're going to have floods in these 4 corners, and that seems reasonable. You'd have that kind of schedule in a house construction, but the architect has no capability to determine the light trajectory of a floodlight
And I think
on a site plan.
the other sections cover what we want, right? Don't scatter it out into the neighbors, keep it contained.
Yeah, but like, they could draw circles, and, it's just, I don't have any
problem.
I think they push back and say,
I don't
we
have
have
any
no.
problem eliminating or striking that
Okay.
at all. So, and then C is also going to require a little bit of a change in that the town shall provide the homeowner or the applicant with educational materials about this ordinance. So we need to figure out what that is.
And we already have that built into the packet.
Okay, good. And then
Not that, we have a mechanism built into the packet.
verification of that a residential or a project has complied with these provisions shall occur during the final electrical inspection, and if not, then a stop order would be issued until it was corrected. F gives some of the criteria for considering variances, which I'm sure we probably have a couple of. I'm not going to go into any detail there. And then,
I don't think we need G.
you don't?
It's self-explanatory. That's what code enforcement does.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it adds anything.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. And then 10, the last section, operational section, I call it, talks about temporary outdoor lighting being permitted from November 15th through January 15th. And then it goes into some other details as far as when temporary lighting is allowed and so forth. And then sections 15 through, or 11 through 15 are the traditional, I would think, legal sections. And and by the way, back to your point, somewhere in here, and I look for it, I can't find it off the top of my head, it does include a statement that the town, someone in the town, will assist residents with implementing this ordinance.
I remember reading that.
Okay.
I think it's in B, isn't it, in the resolution?
So anyway, that would also be an additional requirement resulting from this ordinance as it is written. Okay, then as far as enforcement and penalties, this is basically standard boilerplate stuff, I think. A violation is identified, residents are notified, they're given 30 days to resolve it, and if not, then potentially there's a $100 fine.
Maximum.
Maximum. I believe that's right, yeah. Okay. In the case of light trespass, which is defined as a public nuisance.
Yeah, it's earlier on.
Yeah. Then that's also potentially a violation.
Okay.
Would be a violation. So that's a little bit more of a overview, a little bit more in detail than our last discussion last month. So I thought that might be helpful.
So my view, so we've made some changes that we want to make. The next question is, do we want to put those changes in on our own, spend the next month making up some things, or do we want to send this to the attorney now, have the attorney work on it, so we come back next month, we'll have the attorney's edits and then our own things, or do we want to take another stab ourselves for a month and then send it to the attorney? Where are we on getting Andy's input?
I think before it goes to Andy, we need to make it easy for him to incorporate tonight's discussion. Minimal. I don't know. I mean, I'm okay with that, incorporating the discussion, and then, or if everybody else wants to see it again after we do that, I'm okay with that too.
Okay,
So I think Ed is gonna go back to the IDA and talk about,
Oh,
do we
that's
really
good.
need to have these shielded?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that fair for you, Ed?
Yeah, that's no problem.
So basically, you'll internalize these changes.
Mhm.
We'll come back next month with your feedback on these proposed changes. And then based upon that, we'll either fish or cut bait at that point. We'll either decide, let's move to Andy, or...
That's fine.
Okay.
It's doable, yeah.
Hey, Ed, I had one more question on holiday lighting. It says that such lighting shall be minimized after 11 p.m. What does minimized mean, turned off?
I think minimize means minimized. I mean, the point, I mean, stop and think about it, people. I mean, really. What good, what value is there in leaving, in this case, Christmas lights on all night long? Who the hell sees that?
Well, all night long is one thing, but to people who
Daryl's
go to
point.
bed late, which I do, I usually turn them off when I go to bed. I
Yeah.
violate it every night because I usually go to bed between 11:30 and midnight. So
Okay,
I don't mind.
I don't think
I was
that-
just gonna adjust the thing down to maybe midnight or 1 a.m. or something.
Well, how's Santa gonna find the house?
Says,
It's a minor point, but I know that I would be violating it.
you know, I don't have any problem changing it to midnight.
Okay.
I think, just make it black and white, just turn them off, or, I mean, minimize the, there's no in between, it's so gray, you can't.
Yeah, but it's not enforceable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Yeah, I know nobody's gonna come over, but there's no point putting something in there that everybody's gonna
Oh, I'm
follow.
across the street,
Well,
I'm coming
it's
over.
the
Yeah,
ADA.
you might want to let that one go.
Oh, is it?
You know, so if they say you gotta have time, then he's gotta put in there, you gotta have
Yeah.
time. Reality, you know, the practicality is different than necessarily what that says.
Okay.
I will, I'll try, you want me to change it to midnight?
Yeah, if you would.
I'm good.
All right, so Ed, you,
No problem at all.
so Ed, we'll see you next month, and we'll be back again with this, okay?
Right.
Thanks for your hard work, appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, no problem.
All right, next up, we have a much more elaborate ordinance.
Yeah, I worked hard on it.
Okay, next up, we have the golf cart ordinance that is marked up, looks like a bloodbath in here in my copy here. What's not red, Darrell? Okay, Darrell, up on you, sir.
Well, the only discussion we had from last time is I was gonna change a couple of words that you suggested changing off-road to off-highway, because that's what it said in the state thing. Which I did, and I didn't get it to Linda, I don't think, but I think she changed it anyway. I see it's in here. So, other than that, I think we were all in agreement of it.
All right, anybody have any questions for Darrell?
I make a motion to approve the golf cart ordinance.
All right, I have a motion to approve the golf cart ordinance. Do I have a second?
I second that motion.
All right, we have a second, and all those in favor? Okay, very good. You voted for your own ordinance?
Yes. It's legal, right?
It's not illegal.
Okay. Thanks, Darrell. I appreciate you going through that. It's part of our updating ordinances, so
Yeah, it's a good start.
it's probably half as long once we get rid of all the strikeouts. Now we actually see what it looks like.
Yeah, let me start it on that easy. I
Okay.
hate to do the one Ed did, that's gotta be a lot of work.
All right, thank you very much. All right, next up, we have a discussion-only item of our playground. Serena, that will be you.
I just wanted to make you guys aware that we had a couple repairs in the playground. The big structure out there, the metal busted through. It was a big hole, so we put some caution tape up. Darrell was gonna fix it, but then we had Sam come out and he welded some metal, and so he fixed it. It looks really nice. It's actually better than it was before. And then the other, one of the slides was kind of, it was a wrist, so we had a chain there, but now Sam welded more metal, and now he has the bars to block it off from kids from falling through, and they can't, it's not a strangulation risk. So those two things were done with the playground. And then we had an inspection done, and the inspection did not pass. So we have a couple things to tie in and tweak on the main slide system. So we'll get that done, and then we'll have another inspection.
Who did the inspection?
Steve.
Oh, Steve. Okay.
And the repair cost?
Actually, I don't know,
It's about
about $500.
So, still plenty of budget left for the playground.
Yes.